Here's how to tie a perfect trucker's hitch. Start by taking the end of the rope and creating a bight. Then go underneath the standing end, put this strand over this one, then go over, under, and through this last loop. In the end, you should end up with a directional figure of 8 loop. Then take the end of the rope and go through the support, through the loop that you just created, and pull on it as hard as you can. You'll be able to adjust the tension pretty tight because here you have a 3-to-1 mechanical advantage. Now pinch these two together so that the tension holds and go around and through itself to create a half hitch. And to fully secure it, do another half hitch. And that's how a finished trucker's hitch should look like. It's called the trucker's hitch because it's usually used to secure loads on trucks, trailers, and car roofs. But because of the mechanical advantage, you can also use it in situations like this, where you need to tension a rope for a hammock, a tent, or something similar. Here's how to tie the square knot. Start by placing both rope ends next to one another and then wrapping the second one around the first one. Now again, place both of them next to one another and wrap the right one around the left one, like this. Finish, pull both ropes while holding the rope ends, then release them and pull again. Make sure to leave the ends rather long because this knot tends to slip if pulled with a lot of force. For very simple applications, this knot is secure enough to connect to shorter ropes. If you want something more secure, you could do 2 turns around each rope instead of 1. But once tightened and put under load, it becomes pretty much a big mess that's very hard to untie. A much better solution would be to tie a figure-8 bend knot instead, which we covered in another video. Here's how to tie the Taut-line hitch. Start by wrapping the free end around the object. Then go around the standing end twice in the direction of the loop. Now take the end and cross over and do another turn in the same direction. And finally tug the end underneath itself like this. It's a very simple slide and grip knot that you can use anytime you need to tension the guy lines of your tent or your tarp, or if you need to make a close hanging line. If it still slides when you pull on it, you can do 3 turns or even 4 turns before finally finishing the knot. This will make it harder to slide, but it will have much more friction. And that's how a finished taut-line hitch should look like. Here's how to tie the double fisherman's knot. It's used to create a very strong connection between 2 ropes of similar diameters. Start by placing the ends of each rope next to each other. Put your thumb on the first rope and go around it with the second one. Now go around it once again, this time forming an X. Finally, take out your thumb and pass the working end through both of these loops. This is called a double overhand stopper knot, and you can check that it's tied correctly by making sure that the strands are parallel on one side and forming an X on the other one. Now form another double overhand stopper knot, only in the other direction and with the other rope. To finish the knot, pull on both ends of the rope. This connection is so strong that it can be used for life-threatening situations. For example, you can connect 2 shorter ropes and then use it for rock climbing. Just make sure to leave the ends at least a few inches long to account for slippage, because as you tighten the knot, the ends can shorten a bit, especially under very heavy loads. It's a bit hard to untie, but not impossible to do with a bit of patience. Here's how to tie the Clove hitch, which is one of the most useful knots to know in everyday situations. To tie it, take the end of the rope and go around the post on the right side, then go around it once again, but this time on the left side, and finally tug the end of the rope underneath this strand over here and tighten it. But also make sure to dress the knot neatly together so that there's no slack when you pull on it. It isn't the most secure hitch, but it's pretty strong and you can tie it very easily. But what's even better, you can untie it very easily when you don't need it anymore. If you want to make it more secure, you can tie another half hitch around it here in the front. Instead of a half hitch, a lot of people like to do another clove hitch on the top, but I found that the bottom clove hitch usually tends to seize up pretty badly if you do that. Here's how to tie a figure 8 follow-through knot, also sometimes referred to as the rewoven figure of 8 knot. Start by creating a figure 8 knot at the end of your rope. Take a rather long piece of rope, then go under, up, under, and through the final opening. The finished knot should look something like this, and it should have a rather long piece of rope at the end of it. Now take the end of the rope and go over the attachment point that you'll be using. Now you need to retrace the figure of 8 that you just made, just in the other direction. To make sure that it's tied correctly, make sure that it has 3 sets of parallel ropes on each side. It's a very strong knot that's most commonly used in climbing for attaching to the harness, but you can also use it anytime you need to create a strong connection to a fixed object. The knot tightens by itself when it's pulled, so it doesn't require a stopper knot. But a lot of people, especially climbers, like to add another double overhand stopper knot for additional safety. Here's how to tie the Prusik hitch knot. It's most commonly used in climbing to climb up a rope because as you pull it, it provides a lot of friction. But as you release it, you can freely move the knot upwards the rope. To tie this knot, you first need to get a Prusik loop, which is essentially a fixed loop which is created with a double fisherman's knot. Place the end of the loop in front of the rope and then take the other end and wrap it around the rope. Now continue wrapping it around another 2 or 3 times. Now take the end with the knot and pull it to one side. And finally, dress this knot so that in the end it looks exactly like this. It's important to do this part because it improves the overall friction. If you pull on it and it still slides, then you can wrap it around another time. The good thing about the Prusik loop is that you can load it in both directions and it still works just as fine. Its only downside is that it will not work with frozen or wet rope. In these instances, it's better to use a mechanical Prusik. To ascend a rope using Prusik loops, you need to get 2 loops, one on top and one at the bottom. You need to attach the top one to your climbing harness and you can place your feet through the bottom one. Essentially, you need to pull up the top Prusik loop, then the bottom one, then again the first one, and by doing this, you can slowly and safely climb up a climbing rope. Here's how to tie the timber hitch knot. Use this knot whenever you need to pull heavy logs because it grips them very well and the standing end exits right in the direction of the log, so it's very easy to pull. You can also use it to bundle up a bunch of smaller kindling to bring back to your fire. Start by taking the end of the rope and placing it parallel to the log. After that, you need to go around the log. Then go underneath the standing end and underneath itself. And now you need to continue tying around this strand another 2 or 3 times. Tighten it as much as you can and you're pretty much good to go. To learn other useful knots, subscribe to our channel. Here's how to tie the water bend knot. It's a very commonly used knot for creating fixed loops for rock climbing. You can also tie it using webbing. The process is completely identical, but for illustration purposes, I'll show it with rope instead. Start by tying a loose overhand knot near the end of the first part of the rope. Then retrace the knot in the other direction with the other end of the rope. When tightened, it should look something like this. If used with webbing, before tightening, make sure that all of the straps are neatly aligned and that they aren't crossing one another. You should also keep the ends rather long because as you put weight on the loop, the ends can shorten over time. It's safe enough to be used for critical situations like climbing, as long as you keep an eye on the ends to make sure that they aren't too short. Here's how to tie a Yosemite bowline knot. Start by creating a loop near the end of the rope. Then take the end and go through it from the backside, then around the standing end, and finally back through the loop. You've essentially now created a regular bowline knot. The Yosemite finish just adds another step to it. So to create the Yosemite finish, take the end of the rope and go outside of the loop, then around the right side of it, and finally back through, exiting right next to the standing end. And finally, tighten the knot. A regular bowline knot can untie under heavy loads if a stopper knot isn't used on the end. Adding the Yosemite finish adds more reliability to the knot. You can use it in all kinds of situations, even when climbing to attach to anchor points or to your climbing harness. To learn other useful knots, subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.